Good evening, friends. Once again, welcome to my Excel session here. Today, we're going to cover a very interesting subject called pivot table. I am sure many would be using this concept in their Excel report building. So many of you guys are aware what is the importance of pivot table. Some of the people are not aware of pivot table, but they really want to use pivot table to simplify their work. So this session is purely for those people who are really confused about pivot table, or they have no idea about pivot table and they really want to learn what is pivot table so that they can simplify their work. So without any further delay, we're gonna start the pivot table session and let's see how it goes. Okay, yeah, let me share the screen. Yes. So guys, today's session, as I told you, that's going to be purely on pivot table, which is one of the important tool in Excel, which helps to simplify your work, which creates a report in 5 seconds, and it saves a lot of time for you, and it does a lot of complex of addition, subtraction, multiplication, or it could be sum of anything, grand totals, which you might be using countif, summary functions. So if you really don't want to use those functions separately, you can use pivot table. It is a very important tool which is really helpful to build a report in Excel. So guys, the main difference between the normal table and the pivot table we need to understand first. Normal table gives you the complete report of the table which is mentioned in the table. However, in pivot table, you get a summarized report, which means that it's going to be in a summary format wherein whatever you want to see, you can only see that particular aspect or that particular element of it. Okay. And the second difference between the normal table and the pivot table is that pivot table is completely flexible. You can change it the way you want, and the normal table is completely fixed. You cannot do anything about that. Okay, so these are two major differences between a pivot table and the normal table. So I'll just walk you through one small example. It's an effort from my side to make you guys understand what exactly the pivot table is. I'm not be going very deep into it, but definitely I'm going to cover most of the basic subjects of pivot table, the elements, the highlighters which is being used, so that you can at least be able to build a pivot table report in 5 seconds, right? Okay, let's go to pivot table data. Okay, so this is the example which I have made here. This comprises of date, product, region, name, unit, sales. So from the name itself, you can identify what kind of data it is. Okay, so now if you really want to know or you want to build pivot table of this particular report, definitely you can do that. How are you going to do it? The first approach is that you have to click inside the table. So that you don't have to manually select the table if you selected just one of the cell inside the table. So now where we're going to go is we're going to go to insert option, and the left side on the corner you have a pivot table option. You click on the pivot table, and guys, here two things which is being asked in the pop-up window. One is that what is your table range? So now table range is already selected because I told you that if you select inside the table, you don't have to manually select your data. So it is already been selected. And second question is new worksheet or existing worksheet. I mean, whether you want to save your pivot table or you want to see your pivot table in the existing worksheet, or it's totally into a different Excel sheet. So as if now I'm going to select existing worksheet, and the location I'll just select right here so that it is easy for us to refer back, and I'll click on OK. Right, so the moment I click on OK, I get the pivot table fields. So if you look at this very carefully, these are the columns which is being updated in your Excel. So if you see, it's date, product, region, name, unit, sales. And these four categories are the categories where you play with all the columns so that you get the desired format of your pivot table. So first one is filter, column, rows, value. So let's go with the rows. Rows means that your report would be, if you select any of your column header in a row format, it shows you in a row. Similarly, it in columns, values, and values is basically, it has to be in numbers so that it is easy for the pivot table to give you the sum of any data, a count of any data, or multiplication result, or a division result. Okay, so now for example, let's gonna start our sample building pivot table. So what I'll do is I'll just take let's take region in the rows. So guys, here you just need to select here and drag it to the rows. It's as simple as that. You don't have to break your head. And I would say I would just put names in the column. Okay, and sales, let's go and put it here in the value side. So now if I really want to look at my data, which would be something like this, right? So I'll just give it a little bit of formatting so that it is in a readable form. Okay, so now you can see that the moment when we selected the, 1 minute, I'll just get the field here so that it is easy for us to insert. So remember the name we have inserted in the column. So you could see all the names which are viewed here in this particular columns. Then the regions are in the rows, east, north, south, west, and some of sales are definitely for the each different people who have done the sales for the different regions, which has been reflecting here, right? So now if we look at the example of it, so for example, now the names could be more than 10, like 10,000, could be like in thousands and thousands. So it doesn't look good. So what we're going to do is we're going to again go to our uh, field, pivot table field, so that it is easy for us to again look at the details here. All right. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to just interchange name. I'll drag it and put it to rows, and the region I'll just drag it and put it to columns. So can you see the changes, guys? The moment I make the changes in the pivot table field, I definitely see the changes here also. So now I think this looks a little better, where we have the sum of sales, the row labels, we have the regions and grand total. Okay, so now it looks a little better than the previous one. So the idea behind shifting or juggling between the rows and columns and the sum is for you to explore and also to see that how the report looks like, so that the moment you start exploring, you're going to learn more than what I have actually taught you. So it's all about practice, guys. You need to explore how you're going to do it, practice as much as you can. So now let's see, this is our data. So now instead of sum of sales, what I need is, let's say, units. So what I'll do is I'll just put the sales back and I put the units here. So you can see, guys, here you get all the units getting highlighted automatically. So this is the charm of pivot table. You don't have to manually look at it. Right. Something very important I'm going to tell you is, for example, let's read the data for person A. For the East region, they have done 12, but we are not really sure about how much they have done the sales, how much they have contributed to the total revenue or the sales figure. So the best part is when we double click on the 12 cell, we're going to get the result just before the pivot table data. I need to say just before your data where you're building your pivot. So let's double click on this. Yes. So the moment we double click on this, you can see here the report for the 12 unit comes in automatically. It tells you the date, it tells you the product, it tells you the region. It was a person A, your total sold was 2,300 rupees of sales, which was done. So that's how the data comes. So it can be for any of the numbers you want to see. You can look at it. You can double click and look at it. So now let's show you something about the visuality of it, the way how it is being presented. So the moment when your cursor or if you have selected inside the table, you'll have the pivot table tools getting highlighted. Once I click here, it goes off. Once I click here, it comes in. So this basically helps you to modify your data. It helps you to read the report correctly by setting the right headers. Let's go with the design first. So the moment when we go to the design, you could see there are many numbers of color formats which helps you to look at your report in a much compact way, and it looks good as a presentation. So for example, I'll just select the black one so that it is a little more readable. Okay, so I'll just go with this design here. Let's look at the tabs here. When we uncheck row headers, there is not much differences. When we check banded rows, you can see these are the colors which comes in the alternate rows. Okay, if I uncheck, it goes off. Again, banded columns, as again the columns get banded. If I want both of them, I'm gonna get it like this. So as if now I'll uncheck both of them, the column headers. So the moment I click uncheck the column headers, the color goes off. The moment I click on or check the column headers, it comes in. Okay. So now if you look at the row labels, definitely this is something which is not matching with the name. So ideally it has to be the name of the person. So what we're going to do is we're going to go to report layout. So guys, always remember that your report initially, which pivot table builds or the Excel builds the pivot table, is in the compact form. So if you want to change it, you can change it here to different format. Let's go to show in outline form. So guys, the moment I change it to outline form, I see the name coming in here, which definitely makes a lot of sense, right? So I usually use the outline form so that all some or most of the data look perfectly fine, and all the headers and the rows are correctly defined and does make sense, right? So you again, if you go back to grand totals here. So guys, if you look at this report, you have the grand total here on the column. You also have in a row. So we definitely don't want to have both of them together. So what we're going to do here is we're going to go here and we have certain options like off for rows and columns. If I click this, the grand total goes from both the rows and the columns, isn't it? Right? So now if I just look at on or row and column, so if I just put it back, it comes in. Right, then you have, suppose if you want to know, if you want to have your grand total only in the rows, on your rows only, or in the columns, you can just go to the columns and on the columns here. Okay, so these are like the settings or the facilities which is given by Microsoft Excel while creating a pivot table. So guys, more and more you explore, you're going to learn many new things how to make a pivot table more interesting. So this is something which is really basic. Okay, now let's go to analyze. So here I will not be covering the complete settings of it, but I'll just tell you that this refresh data is nothing but the moment you change your data here, or if you want to add some data here, and if you want to know that how the change will reflect, so you just need to refresh refresh all, the complete data in your pivot table automatically gets changes whatever changes being made in this particular tab. Okay. To highlight the field list or to delete the field list, you can just click here. So now it is checked, which means you'll have the field list here on the left side or on the right side, no matter. So it is easy for you to make the changes absolutely. And you can just uncheck that, it goes off. Again, you have plus and minus button. So it is like, if you have the field list, you will have the plus and minus, which is mandatory. Okay. So now let's go back to our pivot table, which we have created. Okay. Suppose, for example, again, I want to have the sales figure here back to my values. So what happens? I have the sales figure back to the values here. So now I'm going to tell you something which is really important, and that would be the last area which I'm going to be covering in the session here. So for example, you have the sum of sales here in this particular tab. So you can see here the values are sum of sales. So if you want to know the count, without actually shifting your sales to upward form in the pivot table and get the units here. Instead of that, what you can do is you can click here, which is shown as a down pointer. Go to value field setting, and there you go. You have the all the settings, all the facilities which you can use to modify or change your data. So you have sum, you have count, average, max, minimum, product. So if I just want to go to count and I just click on OK, so here you go. Your complete count of sales comes in if you select from here. So you don't have to go every time. So you can change your values anywhere at any time within seconds. So guys, this is basically all about the pivot table which I have covered. Okay, and I would like you to, in fact, I request you to go through the session more and more time so that you understand what are the basic buttons or the tabs or the settings which we are using to build our pivot table. So I'm sure this small session on pivot table would be very helpful for you, for those people specifically who are really struggling to understand what is pivot table. And I'm sure definitely in their field they can definitely use this pivot table facility to make their life a little bit easier. So once again, it's time to sign off. And as I always say, that we are all together in this journey. So we're going to learn together always, and I'm always will be putting up new interesting subjects on Excel with a very simple